All right, how is everybody? How do I sound? Do I sound good? Y'all hear me?
Sound good?
All right, all
Yeah,
right.
fine.
So, um, October 17th, I believe, is when the Hamas attacked the Israel border. Um, and now Israel has begun its counterattack. Um, And so what I'm just gonna be doing is going through what got us here and talking to some points about where things stand present day. So when we're talking about the Palestine conflict, the first name that has to come up is Theodore Herzl. So Theodore Herzl was a very interesting character. Um, He was a Christian Zionist. He is considered the godfather of Zionism, in fact. But he's the one that got the ball rolling. He first laid out his plan for Zion in his book, Der Judenstaat, and this came after what was called the Dreyfus Affair, where he witnessed or claimed to witness uh, anti-Semitic anti-Semitic sentiment in Britain, but that claim is also um, debated whether it actually happened. So it gives you an idea of, already of what this kind of guy is. He believes that the most effective counter to anti-Semitism was to build a Jewish state, and that's coming from a like part in the Bible about how Moses' children would be promised some promised land, which um, in itself uh, would be like sacrilegious for men to go out about and make upon their own. Um, but they gloss over that for this idea to build a Jewish state. It never really was about um, fulfilling an ancient prophecy. It was about having an enclave. And they first tried this scheme in Uganda, and they did not succeed. Theodore Herzl died during the colonization attempt of Uganda. It did not succeed because they were chased off by the natives. Natives were too hostile for them to overcome, and so it was not sustainable. So Theodore Herzl, he formed the Zionist Congress, and all the Christian Zionist work has been led by the Zionist Congress. They ultimately rejected the Uganda project and committed to Palestine in 1905. They saw it as an ideal location because of the location of Jerusalem. Um, and Theodore Herzl, to him, this was always a colonial project. They always understood it as colonization. They went through all the traditional channels in English law, finding a charter company incorporated in Britain with colonial tasks under its header, founded companies that were very clear in their nature: the Jewish Colonial Trust, the Colonization Commission, the Palestine Land Development, and the British. The British thought some people in Britain did see this as a good like opportunity to expand empire, of course. So there was a sect in Britain that found mutual interest in that, in the imperialism along with a Jewish enclave. Um, there was a lot of people in English that also saw it as unrealistic and not feasible, but the uh, the Chamberlains of Britain won out in the end. Um, and even in his own diary, his own words, he talks about the granting of colonial rights to create this state. So moving on, this brings us to the Balfour Declaration in 1917. You might have heard about this in high school, but this was the time that the British government made a public statement supporting its establishment of Israel. And this was possible because England had declared war on Ottoman in 1914. And as soon as they declared war on the Ottoman Empire, it immediately began planning to plant Israel onto the Ottoman Mandate, or what used to be the Ottoman Mandate. So some time passes. At this point, there's already immigration happening, and ethnic intentions are rising, as Wikipedia would put it. And that eventually led up to a war between the Arab population and the colonist population, and that was called the Palestinian War of 1948. One of the main material factors was the partition plan, the 1947 partition plan. It made no concessions to the Arab population. It divided the land unevenly, with the resources favoring Israel. So that escalated to the Civil War. And the war ends with a truce and armistice in 1949, and Israel having conquered 76% of mandatory Palestine. So the Israel really came up on this conflict. This was an early use of biological warfare that Israel conducted, codenamed cast-eye bread, where they used typhoid bacteria to contaminate water wells in newly cleared Arab villages. So like from the beginning, stuff's already pretty shady from the Israel side. And with the war comes the Nakba, and that's translates to catastrophe. And this was a pointedly ethnic oriented relocation, ethnic centered relocation. It was the expulsion and flight of 700,000 Palestinians, the deconstruction of 500 Palestinian villages, and subsequent geographical erasure, the denial of Palestinian right of return, and the creation of permanent Palestinian refugees, and the shattering of Palestinian society. So this I would say was the official beginning of the apartheid state. So this has been happening since 1948. So 70 years it's been ethnic apartheid campaign to either remove Palestinians or exterminate. Um, and so some time passes like this until the first Intifada in 1987. Intifada translates to uprising. It was a series of protests and riots carried out by Palestinians in Israeli occupied Palestine territory. And this is decades after civil resistance. So they went through the civil resistance steps until they eventually got to violent action. Israel responds immediately with lethal force. And throughout the Intifada, they eventually find less lethal measures, and this is when they come up with the plastic bullets, the supposedly non-lethal plastic bullets. And out of this, I mean not Israel, but Palestine was able to get recognition as a state. And this is stemming from the Arab nationalist movement that happens behind shortly before the first Intifada. And they also established the two-state principle. So they did manage to get a concession out of this. They weren't able to get a concession until the first Intifada, really. Um, so of course, that's not the last that happened. I may have skipped over the Six-Day War in doing this, but that's also an important conflict. So Palestine got its statehood, but it was not autonomous by any means. Um, Israel controlled the water, it controlled who goes in, who goes out, it controlled the electricity. They had a full occupation. So that was IDF soldiers on the street in Palestine. Um, so it was not a state at all in by really any means. It was a complete vassal of Israel. Um, and some people want to blame the Camp David summit failure, and that was a negotiation that the U.S. was leading that did not result in a peaceful outcome. Um, and so there's the September of violence that was the initial shot of the second Intifada. And out of this, they were able to win a disengagement, and this was when Palestine promised to disengage from the occupation, but it only changed the nature of the occupation. There were no longer IDF soldiers in the street, but Israel still was in control of Palestinian life. And so throughout this, during this, Israel helps form Hamas. They finance Hamas. Hamas was initially a very small faction. But with the continued violence and with the financing from Israel, they eventually came what we know today. What Israel was trying to do by financing Hamas was a divide and rule strategy. See, they wanted to undermine the PLO That's the uh
People's Liberation.
Palestine Liberation um
Organization.
organization, something like that. So they were more like secular. They were a secular uh liberal party, and Hamas was a theocratic militant party. And the defense chief Yadlin um thought that they could divide Israel into two camps, the militants and the moderates. So that brings us to present day. So Hamas now enjoys support from Palestinian people. They do have popular support. While meanwhile, Netanyahu has a very split support in Israel, especially after this unprecedented attack by Hamas. Palestine has or no liberation force in Palestine has ever been able to mount this kind of like operation before. It was nothing really anybody's ever seen. Um, and so this leads to Netanyahu um, calling for Palestinians to leave Gaza within 24 hours. So that's basically another relocation or another ethnic relocation, essentially ethnic cleansing. And they've been building up forces on the border.
Go outside. Go.
They've been building up forces on the border. They've Netanyahu has been saying that he's going to invade. Far as I know, has yet to happen. There has been some calls for ceasefire. There's been some congressional people calling for a ceasefire. I believe recently, the Israel uh, promised to do a ceasefire, but I have been seeing some conflicting reports about Israel saying that's never happened, and that aid coming in from Egypt was getting missile striked. So it's still up in the air. I've been keeping an eye out on it as far as the ground invasion, whether that happens, because it'll be pretty bad news if the ground invasion does happen. We might see the end of southern Gaza, like it might be that bad. So the Zionist project is very sophisticated. It's surprisingly sophisticated. They have a guide for presenting arguments to keep people either on the fence or in support of Israel. The Harazpa handbook, it's called a guidebook to talk on campus about Israel. And it's essentially a guide on how to be like a troll, really, like how to be annoying, like a debate curve. And just using like sophistry, complete sophistry to delegitimize any support for Palestine and reinforce support for the Zionist project, they essentially take Zionism and attach it to Judaism. So if you're anti-Zionist, they would try to call you anti-Semitic. They have troll farms. So they have paid troll farms, a bunch of people getting on computers and yeah, just trolling people once again. Just pro-Israel, pro-Zionist messaging. Al Jazeera made a movie called The Lobby, and it was they never managed to release it, but they did release it on like YouTube, but they didn't manage to release it on like a major platform. Um, but anyways, it goes into the Zionist Israel lobby, and it has a lot of documentation about all the double dealing they do behind closed doors, and they go through different politicians in England that are wooed by the Zionist lobby, and it's how they have it all set up and how like it's just utterly corrupt. They just go through like different tactics like blackmail or character assassination, bribes, you name it. So a major like talking point that surrounds the Palestinian and Israel is the asymmetrical violence and the asymmetrical support enjoyed by the Israel side. So Israel enjoys support of Western military powers and has access to sophisticated weapons, much more sophisticated than what the Palestinians have access to. They often have to resort to stones and their rockets. The most that a Palestinian resistance fighter could get access to would be an RPG, but for the most part, their rockets are oftentimes little more than fireworks, than upgraded fireworks. And not only does Israel have a shiny arsenal, they also have the support of the entirety of Western governments along with their media apparatus. So I don't know if you've seen the unified messaging and support by Western governments, by the United States and Western Europe and all the big names, and the media. There is no criticism within Western journalism concerning Israel right now. It does not exist. Palestine has support from the populations under those governments. Ironically enough, the streets support Palestine. But not much does it have in comparison as far as having institutional support like Israel. So Israel has plenty of people gunning for them. Plenty of people gunning for them. And Palestine, even though it's the one suffering extermination, the media, Western media, goes to great lengths to make it seem like that's either not the case or it is somehow justified. Looking ahead, US diplomats have been urged to not use words like ceasefire. So it's almost like they actively want this to happen. Not just so much enabling it, but encouraging it. This is what I was talking about earlier. Ceasefire report yet disputed by Israel. Israel continues strikes. And recently, uh, uh, a ceasefire has been rejected by the UN Security Council. Um, yeah, with the UK, the US, and Japan voting against the resolution proposed by Russia of all people, of all countries, of all governments. In addition to the ceasefire, Russia had called for the release of all hostages, aid access, and safe evacuation of civilians. So, I mean, that seems like a reasonable offer. I can't imagine why these governments would vote against it. So, what is the bottom line for Lubbock DSA and DSA? So, Lubbock DSA and DSA chapters across the nation see the conflict in Palestine as a Palestinian struggle against the Zionist campaign to exterminate all Arab influence in the region. That it seems to be, we seem to be unified on that front. That this is a fight for liberation of Palestinian liberation. The asymmetry of violence and state support requires us to put the Palestinian victims at the forefront of this conflict. We take the side of the victim, and Palestine as a whole is a victim of Zionist imperialism. And the Palestine state is within its rights to resist colonialism by armed struggle. This is cited in law by the UN. Um, we can criticize Hamas for being messy, but we must also understand that Palestine is going through conditions that we as Westerners cannot fathom, and a certain level of understanding must be offered when making those criticisms. And that's it.
That was pretty good.
Thank you.
Yeah. Another thing to point out would be when Israel had warned one of the hospitals, the Palestinians, to leave, about 70 of them got up to leave, and on their route out, they were specifically targeted and bombed by the IDF.
Yeah, they were
after they
told
were only
to
following instructions.
they were told to relocate to South Gaza, and then they bombed the hospital in South Gaza. Originally, Israel claimed the strike on Twitter and then quickly deleted it, and now it's saying Hamas bombed it, not Israel. But they already claimed that.
Yeah, the control of the media is absolutely insane. And it's like it hurts me because I have to give this one to all my small town conservative rednecks. They're like, "Oh, you trust the news?" Blah, 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 blah. It's like, oh, I could kind of see where they're coming from now. It's a totally different perspective, but I have to see it. It is very valid.
I was talking to Chris yesterday, and I think, there really is no, like, I had posted an article a bit ago about OPEC, and nobody, most of the countries around there are run by oil oligarchs, and there's no support really for Palestine institutionally, like you said, and yeah, so it's just like there's not 1973. There's not going to be an oil embargo. Nations supporting Israel. Like there's no very hopeless situation.
Yeah, it's I mean, I don't know. Even China and Russia are even like, well, guys, like let's stop doing this. And the U.S. and Israel are like, this is what we've always done. What do you mean?
Right.
We just get to see it in real time instead of on a book. Fucking sad.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I follow this
What were you
guy.
saying?
Did you have something else to say?
Oh no, I asked what you were saying.
Oh, I was just gonna like reiterate, like I've been following this guy on. He's a Jewish reporter on. He's on Twitter. Anyway, like he's been following this hospital incident for a long time, like going through all the things that the IDF lied about. It's just like he's got like 15 tweets on all the different aspects of it. It's just like, his conclusion. He went through it very meticulously. So it's like, he all the different types of bombs and like what could have caused the size of the crater and all this. And it's like, it may have not been intentional, but it was still like, why are you lying about this? If you were trying to intercept a rocket and it failed, you didn't intercept it and hit the hospital parking lot. It's like, I mean, it's like, why it makes no sense if you're trying to build credibility to lie about everything. Although I think that's sort of like point of propaganda a lot of times, is to like just confuse people and not let them know anything that's the truth. But it's just,
Yeah, I was watching Hassan's interview with Piers Morgan, and like the shameless like bias, it's so appalling that he was talking to Hassan about like the missile, trying to like say that Hassan is like some merchant of misinformation pretty much.
yeah.
He was pointing out like all the little like things about like the missile, and and it was like really like tenuous, like to like point out like the size of a crater, this one crater, when there's like 100 craters around it that we know that Israel created. Like what?
Right.
I muted you, Antonio, because it was there was a lot of background noise.
I mean, I could go through. It says, um, so the IDF said there was no impact crater originally, showing in its first presser a misleading UAV. I'm not sure what that is. Video that elided the part of the hospital parking lot where the crater was. This cost the IDF credibility, as it was practically no time at all before another Bellingcast had published a picture of the crater, photos of Palestinian police excavating the crater, so on and so forth. Building off this false or recklessly or negligently false claim that there was no impact crater, the next it insisted that the whole event must therefore have been a false flag, with fewer, perhaps even no casualties. This wasn't just false, but obscenely offensive. Major media around the world was at the time broadcasting photos and videos of dead and injured, many of whom were women and children. It wasn't a false flag. The IDF next released a data packet to the international media that constituted, said, its own investigation of the event. Almost all the content in the packet turned out to be false, further damaging their credibility and raising questions about why it was spreading so much deceit if it had done nothing wrong. And the IDF packet contained an alleged audio intercept of the conversation between two Hamas militants. As Channel 4 in the UK has since shown, audio analysis indicates this alleged intercept was in fact a heavily edited and manipulated splicing together of two discrete audio data sources. More importantly, for the Middle East Eye, UK, the intercept contained at least one possibly deliberate IDF mistranslation that turned a they into a we, and therefore created a false confession. And he goes on, like 5 or 6 more tweets of just the things that they lied about. And it's just like, why would you trust? I mean, he does point out a few things that maybe not Hamas lied about, but like there's also the it's not the Islamic Jihad. I don't remember what he calls it. It's also fighting there. It's not necessarily perfectly aligned with Hamas. So there's a lot.
I heard something about ISIS being in the region. Is that it?
He didn't call it ISIS either, so I don't know exactly what it was, but it's a different organization. It's more, fundamental. It's more like ISIS, but yeah, they lied about a few things. So it's not like there's no lying going on, but it's like most of the most of it's coming from the IDF, and just like for no real reason, because it's not like they're going to lose a lot of support. I think people overestimate just like how little the rest of the world cares. Just like I've seen no, Iran even isn't really saying much, are they? I mean, they might be still supplying them some weaponry. I don't know, but like,
Yeah, the media that they're putting out is really interesting. Did y'all see that one thing I sent in the solidarity chat about how they were trying to claim that one of Taylor Swift's bodyguards had come back to fight for the IDF, and then it turned out it was a bodyguard that happened to be in the same place as Taylor in the background of a picture that they're using. Like it's not even someone that was employed by Taylor. But it was really interesting how they went into, what makes this propaganda and how it works with big names like Taylor Swift and everything. They're trying to associate this guy worked with Taylor and now he's working with us. So Taylor must think that, Israel's right. Like, it's really interesting how they're doing it.
I've actually read numerous things where they are quoting Taylor as wishing them well and hoping he does well as he goes back to fight. So they are not just, making it look that way. They are making it look like she is actively supporting the Israeli fight and sending her bodyguard back willingly to do his duty.
Right.
Was what I was reading. So they're not just making it look casual. They're trying to literally, take one of the most influential people in our country for young people and have her words look like she is actively supporting this cause.
Yeah, that's where the community notes on Twitter are really coming in handy. They are obliterating all of the Israel propaganda coming out.
Well, Chris, you had a presentation for us.
Yes, let me pull that up.
All right.
All right, can everybody see that?
Yep.
Okay, great. Let's start this. There we go. Okay, so I'd made a little presentation about what steps we can do to stand in solidarity with the Palestinian people. First off, I just want to make a disclaimer. I know that we're not very many people, and it can often feel like you're screaming into the void, and that's kind of like a lot of what we do. It's feel like we're screaming into the void, no one's listening. But I don't think, I mean, and that can be really discouraging, but I want to encourage you to try to overcome that discouragement. I know that there's not that much we can do. Like I can't, drive over to Palestine right now and, start handing out food, medicine to people. But there are things that we can do to try to help them as much as we can. And I think it's important that we do our part, even though it may be small. So this is a list of things that we can do to try to help people. The first thing is to donate to humanitarian relief funds. Israel yesterday finally started allowing trucks with supplies to cross into Gaza from Egypt. Thankfully, they haven't allowed very many. I think yesterday only 20 trucks were allowed to come in, but they have started allowing some medical supplies to start going into Gaza. So if you'd like to donate to the Red Cross, Red Crescent, that could be a good thing to donate to. Do bear in mind that the Red Cross will also be using that money to help out Israeli medical efforts because they try to be nonpartisan about everything. But there are also other relief organizations that are helping out Palestine. There's the Middle East Children's Alliance, Medical Aid for Palestine, Al-Adwa Health and Community Association, and the Hebron International Rescue Resource Network. These were ones those four ones that were recommended by DSA National as ones you could donate to. So again, like I said, the supplies that are coming in are being very limited by Israel, unfortunately. They've been fighting back against UN calls for allowing more humanitarian aid to come in. And so I don't know how much of these kinds of donations will help, but that is something that you can donate to. The next thing that we can do to help is participating in demonstrations. we can join in solidarity with Palestinian support groups that are in this area. On TTU campus, we did a protest a couple of weeks ago with the Muslim Student Association. I'm sure there are other organizations and other community groups that we could organize with. We've done another demonstration a couple of days ago out on 34th Street. And those are good ways of raising the awareness about the situation. Like Nathan said, a lot of people in the community are apathetic about this and really don't care. This is a good way to make sure that people in the community don't forget about this issue, that they remember what's going on. Also, always remember that there are very supportive people of Israel out there that, can do crazy things. So just make sure you always have a plan to stay safe when you're doing any demonstrations. Just watch out for anybody doing anything weird. The next thing we can do is organizing with labor unions. For labor unions that we've connected with, we can try to get them to make official statements supporting Palestine and condemning Israel aggressions. This is especially important for labor unions that are at companies that are directly supporting Israel right now, like weapons manufacturers or like steel manufacturers that steel goes to weapons manufacturing. So trying to lobby those labor unions to redirect their company's policies to stop that support. We can also organize with other kinds of community organizations like tenant organizations to try to get them to vocalize support for Palestine and get their people mobilized in support. The next thing you can do is contact your representatives in Congress. You can both call or write to them. You should demand ending military aid to Israel and demand support for Representative Cori Bush's Ceasefire Now resolution, which has been supported by several left-leaning members of Congress. They're trying to get that pushed through. That'll cut further military aid to Israel for the time being. It does have some support. I think there are about 10 Congress people that have supported it, but we need a lot more. So it's a good idea to try to write to your representative. The representatives from Lubbock are Senator John Cornyn, Senator Ted Cruz, and Senator Jody Arrington. Now, I know these are all pretty conservative folks, and I'm pretty sure all of them have made statements in support of Israel, unfortunately. But it's good to remind them that not all of their constituents agree with that, and that there are people that they represent that want to stop this violence from Israel.
Jody's
next
a
thing to do,
congressman, not a senator. He's our local congressman.
Yeah, that's what it says.
oh, you're right. I miswrote that. That's my mistake. Yes, you're right. Congressman Jody Arrington. That's what I meant to write. Sorry. Yeah, that's the two senators for Texas and then the representative from our area. The next thing you can do is share your support on the internet. This can be used to help connect, again, raising the awareness of what's going on with people in the community. Use social media accounts that you have to share your support for Palestine. Share news stories that are being honest and talking about the atrocities that are happening in Gaza right now. You can share the official DSA posts that they've put on their social media. You should also follow and support Palestinian content creators and people that are actually there on the ground in Palestine and that are recording what's going on. Make sure that you're following them and keeping up to date on what's going on. The next thing you can do is participate in phone banking campaigns. DSA national and local chapters have organized several phone banks so far. There are ones going on, I think, almost every day this week. You can go on DSA's website to the No Money for Massacres phone banks, and you can sign up to do those. There are several going on this week if you'd like to help with that. That'll be calling people, educating them about what's going on, asking for more support for Palestine from representatives, things like that. And then the last thing you can do is just stay up to date. This conflict, we don't know how long it's going to last. It might be over in a few days. It might be going on for years. We just don't know. And so it's important that we keep focused on this, that we don't allow this to just be something that kind of gets forgotten about and it just keeps happening and we kind of get numb to it. We need to keep up with the news about the conflict, keep listening to the Palestinian people that are being affected by this. And we need to continue to look for new methods of helping people as they come up. Maybe there'll be further opportunities in the future that we'll have to send aid to them or help them in other ways. And we just need to keep aware and looking for those opportunities as they come up. Yeah, that's all I had.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Thanks.
That was good, Chris.
Thanks. And again, like I said, it sometimes feels like you're screaming into the void that no one really cares. But I still think it's like our moral duty to do what we can to help people. Because sometimes the things we do matter. If we just give up and don't try anything, then we'll never accomplish anything. But we have to keep working and trying, and eventually we will make change.
No, yeah, I mean, unfortunately, like I was reading Mao's collected works, and he was taught at 40. So this conflict is older than all of us on chat. And we have one more spiral, so maybe we can knock it out of the park this time. Finally, get rid of this conflict once and for all. But that would involve eradicating imperialism.
So I know some people see this as like a religious thing, and I even seen some like leftists on the internet like put no war but class war under something about Palestine, as if it weren't class war. See, I understand this as a class struggle, so I see this as like a legitimate struggle. Based on class. So it's important to understand that that religion really isn't that much at play here.
Yeah, I feel like unfortunately it is very religious feedback. I feel like there's a big sector of the freedom fighters who realize that this is a continuous class struggle against imperialism.
Another argument that I had thrown at me by Cristo actually was that Hamas and Islam in general is anti-LGBT. And they shouldn't get our support. Palestine shouldn't get our support based on that. And so the response that I gave him was that our support is for all marginalized people. We're not that I'm not gonna put conditions on my support for marginalized people just because a marginalized people has some reactionary elements. And I also went on to tell them that economic progress brings social progress.
Mhm.
So
Also, not to mention, we live in the United States, which is not LGBTQ or women friendly.
yeah. So it seems problematic to apply a standard to these people who are marginalized and have not had economic access
Mhm.
for a century.
And then so we were talking about the other day, Matt, we were discussing how like even even though there are things that we don't agree with about Hamas, that like that's a good example is their repression of LGBTQ folks. Still, like them being in control, like allowing Palestinians to be liberated and have their own nation is much better than the current situation they're in. Because right now, any kind of social progress that wants to be made within Palestine has to fight against basically the entire world. They have to fight against Israel and all their allies that have, you know, immense power. Whereas an independent Palestinian nation could be able to, you know, the workers in that nation would be able to fight for their own, you know, their own liberation and own freedoms on a much easier scale.
We can't expect them to do what the United States just now made legal a couple of years ago when they don't have access to running water. They have other things to worry about. It's like
Exactly.
expecting like someone from a different planet to agree with you on everything. Like they don't have access to the same shit we do to make it a priority.
Yeah.
Yeah, right now they're getting bombed to death, and so
Yeah.
we got to stop the bombing to death, and then we can work on social progress of making sure everyone has equal rights and things. That's a struggle that can only happen once you stop worrying about getting bombed to death.
It's like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You can't really worry about who loves who when you're trying to find a place to eat and sleep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think that argument's used a lot, like, oh, do you support Hamas? Hamas is terrorists, and like, okay, sure, fine. I don't care. I'm not a supporter of Hamas, but like I think a lot of people that use that argument are mainly just trying to do that to shut down conversation and say, therefore, I'm not going to care about this situation because both sides are bad. So screw all the Palestinians. I don't care if they get ethnically cleansed because some of their people are reactionary. And I think that's just a really bad take to make.
Right. I would
Well,
even
yeah. Continue. My bad.
I would even take it farther that like the Hasbara agents have been saying, hey, have been asking, do you condemn Hamas? Because if you do condemn Hamas, then it's essentially like condemning like Palestinian resistance. Because I mean that's been their manifestation of resistance so far is through Hamas.
I think it also just sort of takes away from the focus on what Israel's done and keeps doing. And, you know, they're also a religious state that we are allowing to have our full support. And it's not fair, you know, like this would not happen. Well, I can't say that, but like if Israel was not a religious state, if they did have a democracy, if it was a one state that was a good state, nobody would be arguing about um, you know, wouldn't be criticizing Israel over these things. So it's like it takes the focus away from that, and like, you know, it's like blaming the victim for things that. Why don't we look at the person who's doing this and like a little more and like, hey, maybe that if they stop doing those things, maybe Hamas wouldn't have existed in the first place. You know, you don't know, but it's like when you do things over and over and over to people, they usually strike back or lash out with you know, terrorist attacks or whatever, you know, whatever. So MLK's, you know, writing is the language of the unheard. Not a dissimilar situation.
Yeah, I mean, it's really like a big game of let your friends expose their own bourgeois takes, you know? Like, what is that saying? Well, a difference between a terroristic nation and a nation is which one has a navy or something like that, you know? Like the origins of the word terrorism and the origins of the word anarchy have really fell wayward with Western bourgeois, like, defamation. Because, you know, these words, anarchy and terrorism, weren't inherently negative when they first popped on the scene. But now, you know, most terrorists or quote unquote terrorists are just brown people with guns, black people with guns, you know?
I want to bring one thing that I think people are losing sight or even forgetting about is Israel has top defense. how Hamas got the plans to do the strike has kind of been forgotten. And who benefits from it? We all know it's Israel because they need a reason to reclaim or take over that land that they want. So it's all about going back to the corruption and following, the money. Who benefits from it? And it's all ultimately Israel because it's a free way, well, minus the weapon, gun, bombs and everything, for them to literally take something that we've been looking for a reason to.
Yeah,
I think
a lot of
kind
people
lose
don't
sight of
see
that.
it as Israel's going to come out the winner. They're seeing it as whoever controls Israel is the winner. And that's why everyone's jumping on them, like trying to love Israel the most. So Israel will hand over that oil or whatever.
Israel doesn't even have as much oil, but they have technology. They have scientists and technology that is top, of the line. And that's what a lot of people want, is that knowledge. But it's also that Gaza Strip is a good seaport to keep transports going. This whole thing with Russia and the areas they want to claim. It's all about building pipelines and keeping it going, But yeah.
Yeah, I really was hoping we'd get some sort of, not necessarily opposition, but the other side, because I mean, we all know that we're analyzing it materialistically and taking everything into hand. But if we present any of this to Zionists, they're going to be like, "Oh, but you're wrong. Like, I see what you said, but I don't care."
Amazing too. There's the organization. What is it? Jews for Peace, I think it is, something like that. It's a Jewish organization that's been condemning Israel for its attacks and has been supportive of Palestine, and they've been called anti-Semitic by other people that are pro-Israel supporters. And it's like, look, this is really not about religion. Like that's the smokescreen. This is about imperialism and colonialism. This is about genocide of people. It doesn't matter whose religion is on what side or whatever. The problem is that a group of people are oppressing another group of people, and the people, and they have nuclear weapons and the other side doesn't. That's the problem here.
Yeah, I think the value that the Western empires see in Israel is destabilization of the Middle East. It's a useful satellite just to stir the pot in the Middle East whenever they get too unified, or anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, this is along the lines of the Taiwan-Ukraine question. This is their zone to install a puppet government in the Middle East, a shadow puppet government thing that they've been doing everywhere else across the world. It's a method that's true as time itself. It's productive, it works, and it's easily replicable.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, another proxy.
Another local person, I guess I'm Facebook friends with, Gail, I don't know if you know, he's Jewish.
Hey Tony, your mic is coming, you get a lot of background noise from your mic.
Her name, yeah, so I was saying another local Jewish person, Gail Tutino, I think is her name. I think I'm Facebook friends with her. I'm not sure if I actually know her in real life, but we had a little back and forth on Facebook, and a lot of it was just sort of like, I'm afraid I'm Jewish. I don't know how old she is, but we've had a history of people exterminating us and hating us, and there's still a lot of hatred of Jews around the world, of course. And she's like, well, we need some place to go to if these countries, drive us out. And I mean, I think I mean, I understand people's fears, but I think it's sort of not um, rational in the sense of like, I don't think Israel's probably safer than the United States for Jews or a lot of other places now in 2023. But um, I had to at least give her, yeah, I understand your fears. And I understand that at least some of the people who support a Jew, a Jewish state or a place that they feel.
Also,
Yeah,
after World War II, a lot of the wealth that they captured from Germany, which they felt a lot of it had been taken from Jews in the first place, was given back to the Jewish community. So a lot of them became incredibly wealthy after that because it was like a retribution to them. But they didn't give any to the other people who were picked by the Nazis as, worthy to live. But it was exclusively given back to the Jewish community, and that was used to help found the Israeli state. That was a result after World War II.
That's just ridiculous. Like that these governments are fully capable of doing retribution, but refuse to do it for our oppressed minorities here in the United States. But that's disgusting too. That's crazy. Because everyone's like, "Oh, retributions are never possible." Like that's hippie thinking. But I guess it is possible. So like, why the fuck aren't we doing it?
Right?
Well, who benefited? It was like the winners of World War II who decided. America, Britain, the people who basically it benefited still. So
There is some weird contradictions going on with Christian Zionism. Christian Zionism can be pretty anti-Semitic, and like it's coming from like a place of like where like anti-Semitism is very prevalent, but somehow the Zionism is very popular.
It's because they see the Jews as a means to an end. They want their rapture, they want their apocalypse, and they believe that they can only get it if the Jews own that land, the Mount Sinai and everything.
they get their 1,000-year reign in Jerusalem, the new heaven on earth. That is what Christians are indoctrinated into believing. You go to any mainstream, non-denominational evangelistic church, you are strictly, it's all about Israel. You have to support Israel. You have to give money to Israel. You have to literally worship Israel. And that is the way it is indoctrinated.
Yeah, it really is an indoctrination. Like, it's something I'm personally having to fight against because, like, I mean, I even exposed a bit of it to Chris yesterday. I was like, please don't put that Free Palestine sign on my table. I don't want people to, like, automatically assume it's mine. Because I'm just like, I was indoctrinated in the whole Israel needs to be theirs. It's been theirs for thousands of years. I didn't know any of the history and everything. And it's still very hard for me to not just automatically be like, yay, Israel, because that's what I was taught for so long.
Well, they go on a false belief that Moses, when they made this journey through the pilgrimage and everything, the thing is, if you look back on true archaeological history, they didn't even land in these places. They weren't even, half the shit that is in there isn't even the truth now that they're finding more archaeological proof. That's not funded by Jewish people, that's privately funded. I mean, they weren't even there. So they were like in another whole area. And so a lot of the stuff you read or that they even believe, because sometime during the Muslim time, it kind of got skewed around a little. And so a lot of it's not true. It's just what they believe.
Yeah, I mean, that's what happens to a population when you read one whole book your whole life, and this book's been translated to hell since who knows when. So it's like, I remember, like, go read a book, like, people tell me go read books, and I'm like, I read books. And they're like, oh, those are the wrong books. I was like, you've been sitting here reading the same book for 30 years, man. Like really?
Well, they believe it's unaltered the word of God. And I'm like, no, the Romans wrote part of it, and the patriarchal tone throughout the time has only gotten worse because it became a means to control people, women. They didn't have a place in this or that. And that's all it does. I mean, like hell, I tell people, it's not even in the damn Bible. It's mistranslated. It's all, just that got mixed up along the way.
Mhm. I heard this one thing. I don't know. It might have came from a bad place, but I mean, it kind of applies. When you want to know who controls things, look towards those you cannot criticize. And I mean, that could be skewed into being like, oh, fuck minorities,
Yeah, people use that all the time for anti-left stuff, like cancel culture and stuff. But I don't really like that.
Yeah, I know that one really kind of is iffy. It could be really like pushed to the right, but I mean, it applies every now and then. Anything else, guys? I think, I mean, that was good educational, even though we're all at the same circle.
Yeah.
I'm probably about my bike ride home. Hopefully I don't get pulled over.
Right. Yeah, well, it's good talking to y'all and discussing this issue. I'll prepare this and make the necessary edits and put it up YouTube.
Are any of y'all gonna go sit in tomorrow at the city commissioner's office at 10 a.m.?
I am.
Yes, I'll be there.
Okay. All right. Chris, you think you can give me a ride?
Yeah, I can give you a ride.
All right. Well, I'll see y'all when I see y'all. I hope you'll have a good night.